ओम पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते. So welcome to our Saturday morning regular session, 10 o'clock in the morning, after a gap of about 2.5 months. So we will continue on our journey of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13. Last time we covered up to verse number 16, 17. We will start from the next verse, but before that, I would like to reiterate a few things since this is very, very important chapter. And there was a gap of a week, so I think it's worthwhile to recuperate a little bit. So in this chapter, the first thing explained was what is Kshetra, then what is Gyan, and what is Kshetragya. Kshetra is basically Prakriti, and we talked about 24 components progressively, starting from Avyakt to Mahat Tattva to Ahankar, then 5 Tanmatras, then 5 Jnanendriya, 5 Karmendriya, and 5 what we call gross elements in the nature, and Antakaran. So these were 24 components of what we call Kshetra. Then Kshetra has Vikar. Vikar is basically when the actions or the human activities interact with nature, or we can say the 5 senses of action and 5 senses of perception. When they interact with the 5 gross elements of nature, then we have some experience. The experience could be pleasant, could be unpleasant. So that leads to dukh and sukh. If the experience is pleasant, then we have more desire to experience it. So it leads to what we call ichha or rag. And if we have unpleasant experience, then it leads to dvesh or not to have that kind of experience again. So these are basically the vikars which can further expand further depending on the situation. So this is what Kshetra is. And then Lord Krishna talked about Gyan. He fundamentally talked about 16 important elements of Gyan. And I would like to reiterate a little bit of that. That is श्रेष्ठता के अभिमान का अभाव, दंभाचरण का अभाव, अहिंसा, क्षमा भाव, आचार्य की उपासना, बाहर भीतर की शुद्धि, अंतःकरण की स्थिरता, इंद्रियों का निग्रह, आसक्ति का अभाव, जन्म मृत्यु जरा व्याधि, इनमें दुख एवं दोषों का सोच विचार करना, स्त्री पुरुष घर आदि में आसक्ति का न होना, चित्त का सम रहना, परमेश्वर में अव्यभिचारिणी भक्ति, दैट इज अनंत भक्ति, विषयासक्त पुरुषों में ज्यादा समुदाय में रहना नहीं, उनके साथ ज्यादा नहीं रहना, अध्यात्म ज्ञान में रुचि और तत्व ज्ञान द्वारा परमात्मा को सब जगह देखना. So these are described as the principal pillars of Gyan, and then anything which is not part of this is a Gyan. And then he talked about Kshetragya, that is the Purush, Prakriti and Purush. And he talked many things about Purush as well. Then he said that he is closest and he is the farthest. He is everywhere. He is without any birth, without any death. He is eternal. He is omnipresent. He is the smallest of the smallest and the greatest of the greatest. He is without any divisions, but appears to be like a divided one. So these are, some of the specific features he talked about. The Purush, or we can call it Paramatma, or we can call it consciousness, or Kshetrajna. Now we are moving to the next part. Now, next part is equally important here, and each of these verses are giving us certain new direction in life. Now we will go back to verse number 17 first. वह परम ब्रह्म ज्योतियों का भी ज्योति एवं माया से अत्यंत परे कहा गया है। वह परमात्मा बोध स्वरूप, जानने के योग्य एवं तत्व ज्ञान से प्राप्त होने योग्य है और सबके हृदय में विशेष रूप से स्थित है। Now this verse contains many fundamental truths. पर ब्रह्म ज्योतियों का भी ज्योति, that he is the light of all lights, he is the origin of all, he is the cause of all causes. This is what the first part of this verse says. Maya se atyant pare, that there is no illusion there, there is no what you call vikar there, no modification is possible. It is without any modification, without any change, without any variation. It's eternal, it's omnipresent. Then by Atma Bodh Swarup. Bodh Swarup means, in fact, in one of the Vedas, they say Pragyanam Brahman, that Paramatma Gyan hai. So this is basically the reiteration of that Atma Bodh Swarup hai, Paramatma Bodh Swarup hai. And Tattva Gyan se प्राप्त होने योग्य है. Tattva Gyan means basically to go to the fundamentals of everything, which is beyond further change. Like you break the atom to the smallest part, and whatever comes, that is fundamental of the atom. Similarly, we go down to the part which is, without alteration, which cannot be modified further. That part is basically fundamental. So if we go back in every direction, we will end up to that fundamental Tattva Gyan in terms of Bhagavad Gita. Then सबके हृदय में विशेष रूप से स्थित है. Now he is reconfirming that he is established, or he is present in every human heart, or every heart, not only human heart, every heart. He is present everywhere in that sense. So that is what he already said when he was describing actually in the first few verses itself, when he was describing Kshetra, he said that Paramatma और आत्मा का स्वरूप एक सा है, मतलब एक ही है. Therefore, he already said that Atma is part of Paramatma, and he is reiterating here that सबके हृदय में विशेष रूप से स्थित है. In Sanskrit, it says Hridhi Sarvasya Visthitam, that he is established in every heart. Now, this is what he said in verse number 18. इस प्रकार क्षेत्र तथा ज्ञान और जानने योग्य परमात्मा का स्वरूप संक्षेप में कहा गया है. मेरा भक्त इस तत्व को जानकर मेरे स्वरूप को प्राप्त हो जाता है. So this is what he said up to verse number 18. It is all the fundamental knowledge of this universe which has been contained in the last 17 verses. It contains all the science which is known to humanity till today. Now verse number 19. प्रकृति और पुरुष इन दोनों का ही तू अनादि जान, इन दोनों को ही तू अनादि जान, तथा राग द्वेष आदि विकारों को तथा त्रिगुणात्मक संपूर्ण पदार्थों को प्रकृति से उत्पन्न हुआ जान. Now he is explaining how this world works. What is the reality of this sansar in which we live? He says Prakriti or Purus, दोनों को अनादि जान. Now this is a very fundamental statement. lot of people ask us question कि ये संसार कब पैदा हुआ, किसने पैदा किया. So the answer here is that ये संसार किसी ने पैदा नहीं किया. ये कब पैदा हुआ ये क्वेश्चन नहीं उठता. It is anadi, that it has existed since the beginning. Whenever you call the beginning, it has existed since then. In fact, it has no beginning. It is eternal. It has existed all the time. And that is what he says, both Prakriti and Purus. That is this nature, which we see all around, the gross elements, and also the Paramatma, the life force. They are both in existence ever, all the time. There's no beginning. This is a very fundamental statement. And therefore, if we ask कि संसार कब पैदा हुआ, किसने पैदा किया, it is not having any meaning at all, because this statement answers very clearly that both the physical nature which is in existence and the life force both have been in existence since the time eternal. Now, how this changes? Now, this changes in this world, which we see, the modifications are happening every millisecond. If we look at, for example, clouds in the sky, they are changing constantly. If we look at a house, for example, it is changing. The chemical composition of all those materials is changing constantly. If we look at the river, the water is constantly flowing. If we look at our own body, it's constantly changing. In fact, I was looking at my photographs a few years ago and current one, there's tremendous difference. And that difference has come because of the trickle of drop every millisecond. Every millisecond it is changing. So the change is constant. Why this happens? This is happening because of body's interaction with the gross element of nature. Gross elements of nature are connected with our sense organs, both of action and perception, and they tend to interact with the physical nature, and that interaction causes rag and dvesh. The interaction gives you pleasure or displeasure. If it gives you pleasure, then it causes rag. If it gives you displeasure, then it causes dvesh. And because of the three fundamental qualities of the nature, that is Raj, Stam, and Sat, these three qualities, along with these Vikaras, they give birth to all the happenings in this physical world. So the physical world, all the happenings that happen, they happen because of interaction of our sense organs with the physical universe, interaction of our sense organ with our own mind, because it gives us the pleasure or displeasure, and then it leads to rag and dvesh. So that interaction based on the experience with the nature gives us dukh and sukh and rag and dvesh. And then the three elements of physical nature, they cause all these vikaras, all these modifications, all the changes which we see in the natural forces in the manifest world. So this is a very fundamental physics which has been mentioned in this verse. Now this has been further explained. Verse number 20. कार्य और करण को उत्पन्न करने में प्रकृति हेतु कही गई है, कार्य और करण को उत्पन्न करने में, और जीवात्मा दुख सुखों के भोक्तापन में अर्थात भोगने में हेतु कहा गया है. Now this is a very deep statement. कार्य और करण. Karya or karan, how do we do? How do we act, and what are the instruments of our act? The instruments of our act, those are five senses of action, five senses of perception. And the act is what we actually do. with our body-mind complex. All this, he says, is happening because of the natural forces. This is not happening because of the universal consciousness. It is the natural force which make all this happen. This is the nature which has a law, and that law gives birth to all these reactions and actions. So there are three things here. Karan means instruments of action. Instruments of actions are the Jnanendriya and Karmendriya of all the living creatures. Karya is the action which is done by all the living creatures. And Prakriti is the one which has three fundamental qualities, gunas, and five gross elements. So interaction of all these is giving birth to all the activities in this world. So now we can understand that all the activities in this world are happening in the kshetra. Kshetra is the field. In English, if we can call it field, all activities are happening, all instruments are in the field, all activities are in the field, and the interaction is with only the natural forces. This is how it is happening. But सुख दुख में भोक्तापन में जीवात्मा is involved. Now this is what? Why do you feel pain and pleasure? Why do you feel, attachment and distraction? Why? That is because you have that consciousness which is associated with your body-mind complex. And that consciousness, when it associates with body-mind complex, is called Jivatma. It is the Atma which is associated with body-mind complex, and that is why this is a separate name given to it, Jivatma. Now that association gives what we call consciousness to this instrument, which is made of nature. That instrument becomes full of chetana, that becomes full of awareness because of that consciousness. Let's look at this way. For example, the moon does not have its own light. The sunlight provides moon the light, and then the moon reflects that light. So the moon, without having its own light, is also able to reflect the light borrowed from the sun. Similarly, the body-mind complex does not have its own awareness or own consciousness, but since it is associated with the universal consciousness, that is why it has acquired the element of consciousness which makes you feel good or bad, which makes you feel desire for something and hatred for something else, which gives you pleasure from something and gives you pain from something. So this is how the action-reaction happens in this world. This is extremely important to understand the overall functioning of this universe and our interaction, or the interaction of all the living beings with this physical universe, and how it creates the desires and hatred, the pleasure and the pain, the attachment and detachment in this world. So this is what has been explained in this particular verse. Now, verse number 21. Each of these verses are so deep that we must have to meditate on each one of them again and again. प्रकृति में स्थित ही पुरुष प्रकृति से उत्पन्न त्रिगुणात्मक पदार्थों को भोगता है और इन गुणों का संग ही इस जीवात्मा के अच्छी बुरी योनियों में जन्म लेने का कारण है. Now he is explaining further that why do we get birth in good and bad yonis or forms. Somebody is born as a worm, somebody as a bird, somebody as animal, somebody as human being, somebody as something else. Why? Even among human beings, somebody is born in a good family, somebody is born in a very poor family, somebody is born with good qualities, somebody is born with poor qualities. All this is now explained in this verse. प्रकृति में स्थित पुरुष, प्रकृति में स्थित पुरुष, that is what we discussed just now, that the association of the consciousness with body mind complex, that is body, all senses, mind and intellect, that association gives us the feeling of good and bad, attachment and detachment, and therefore we become bhokta, that we are enjoying or suffering, whatever word we can use. Bhokta is both. When you are getting pleasure, then you are enjoying. When you are not getting pleasure, you are suffering. So you become bhokta because of this association of consciousness with the body mind complex, which is made of nature, which is made of kshetra. Now this association of kshetra and kshetragya, that is the one which actually leads you to a new birth in whatever category you are born. Now how that happens? That happens because of the three qualities of the nature, Sat, Raj and Tam. These qualities simultaneously impact on our actions. And as a result of that impact, we experience or we perform good or bad acts. And that is why we are impacted how we will be born in our next birth. So the whole process is because of the association between Kshetra and Kshetragya, between Prakriti and Purus in our body-mind complex. So long as this association remains, we will continue to remain in this world with all the modifications, and we shall continue to experience pain and pleasure, good and bad. We will continue to have all these feelings. The dualities will continue to exist. That cannot be discarded so long as this association remains. Now, we'll come to verse number 22 first, and then we will do little explanation on that. Now, verse number 22 is another very deep verse. इस देह में स्थित यह आत्मा वास्तव में परमात्मा ही है. That he is reiterating again. He already said कि सबके हृदय में मैं स्थित हूं. Now he is saying इस देह में स्थित यह आत्मा वास्तव में परमात्मा ही है. वह साक्षी होने से उपद्रष्टा, यथार्थ सम्मति वाला होने से अनुमंता, सबका धारण पोषण करने वाला होने से भर्ता, जीव रूप से भोक्ता, ब्रह्मा आदि का भी स्वामी होने से महेश्वर, शुद्ध सच्चिदानंद घन होने से परमात्मा ऐसे कहा गया है. Now this is, I think there are a lot of expertise is needed to explain this verse. So I don't know how much I can explain, but I'll try whatever I can. You see the Jivatma. Let's start with Jivatma. Jivatma is the one which is associated with our body-mind complex. The Kshetrajya which is associated with our body-mind complex, that gives birth to Jivatma. So Jivatma is Bhokta, that we have understood from the previous verse. And Jivatma is Bhokta because it is associated with the body-mind complex. So long as it remains associated, this will remain Bhokta and that will continue. So this is one part of this verse. Jeev Roop se Bhokta. So this is what Jeev Roop se we are Bhokta. Now the first part. Sakshi hone se Updrashta. If we can segregate Kshetra and Kshetrajya, if we can become Shakshi, the Kshetrajya which is part of our life force, which is our life force, if we can segregate that life force from the body-mind complex, then it becomes Updrashta. Then it only becomes Drashta, that it is watching from, a distance or watching from near, whatever your activities are, but it is not involved. It is not Bhokta. It is Updrashta. It's only a working like a watchman. Yathar sammati wala hone se. Now this is somewhat diluted version. The best version is Updrashta, that you distinguish between the body-mind complex and yourself. That is what we do in meditation process. That your consciousness is separate and you are observing your body-mind complex. Then your Atma is in the process of Updrashta. It is only observing. But Yathar Sammati Dwala. Sammati is taken from the body-mind complex when you want to do certain things. You experience pain and pleasure. In that process, you are taking approval from your inner self. What should I do? You are asking. And then inner self is giving you advice. Now that advice is an advice in your daily life, in your sansaric life. Now that advice, if you take therein, it becomes Anumanta. The Atma becomes Anumanta. It is giving you some advice. It is giving you certain, suggestions. And if you agree with those suggestions, then it becomes Anumanta. This is what we do in our real life. When we have some trouble, we go back to our inner self and we ask, what should I do? And then inner self give you suggestions. If you agree with those suggestions, then the Atma is working as Anumanta. So this is the second form of Atma. The first form is Updrashta, which is the purest. It is just observing. It is looking at you, looking at the body-mind complex. It is not associated with body-mind complex. In the second format, it is giving you some advice. And then if you accept that advice, then it becomes Anumanta. So indirectly, it is somewhat associated with the body-mind complex, somewhat, but not completely, not like Bhokta, not like Jivatma. थर्ड वन, सबका धारण पोषण करने वाला होने से भरता. Now this Atma, this is a universal consciousness. This is prevailing everywhere. It activates everything. For example, we look at the agricultural process. Now, the sunlight provides heat and energy to the earth. Then the rain comes, it makes it fertile. When you put the seed there, then the fertility comes up and the seed becomes a plant, and finally it gives you a fruit, or it gives you, whatever it's supposed to give. So this whole process looks absolutely natural. But since the Universal consciousness is everywhere, acting in every portion. It is actually acting as our what we call dharan poshan karne wala. It is nurturing us. It is providing us food. It is providing us clothing. It is providing us housing. It is providing us, all necessities of water. Because even in the nature, whatever activities are happening, they are happening because of this prevalence of the universal consciousness in every single part of nature. And that is what he is referring here. So the mix of, that is my understanding, so the natural forces which are helping us in maintaining and nurturing our body mind complex are also operating with the help of the Supreme. And therefore, that Atma, that Paramatma, is also working as Dharan Posan Karne Wala ya Bharta, that he is the one who is sustaining everything on this universe. So these are three different forms of the same Paramatma. साक्षी होने से ही इज कॉल्ड उपद्रष्टा, यथार्थ सम्मति वाला देने होने से ही इज कॉल्ड अनुमंता, and he is providing all the activities for our survival, all the things that are required for our survival and growth, and therefore he is called bharta. And जीव रूप से भोक्ता, that we already saw, that when the body mind complex and the consciousness they are associated, then it works as bhokta. So these are the four different forms which are visible in this universe of Paramatma. Paramatma could be Uptrasta, he could be Anumanta, he could be Bharta, and he could it is. Yes, it is also called Maheshwar, it is also called Satchitanand Ghan, it is called the Supreme of the Supreme. So this is the explanation in these four verses, verse number 19, 20, 21, and 22. Okay, so let me repeat that. I know where it is. Yeah. So in this verse 22, Lord Krishna is explaining the four different versions of Paramatma which we experience in our daily life. One is Updrashta, when the Atma is completely disassociated with the body mind complex, and when you use it as Drashta, then it is called Updrashta. Up means, very closely observer. Up means close, like Upanishad that you sit close. Similarly, here Updrashta means watching closely. That is one. Then Anumanta, that is the position when we are the body mind complex because of our experience with the nature, the experience resulting in pain and pleasure, the experience resulting in variety of forms. If we ask for certain suggestions from our inner self, then it gives us the suggestions, and if we accept those suggestions, then it is called anumanta. That is the second, uh, you know uh, what you call form of Atma, which is experienced by each of us every single day. The third one is the Bharta. Bharta is the one which means that every living being in this universe is looked after by the same universal force, by the same universal consciousness, because this provides all the instruments for our food and our survival in this world. as I explained, how the agriculture happens, how we sustain, how, for example, cotton is produced, how the wool is produced. All this is happening because of the what we call Srashti Chakra, or what we call the cycle of life which has been created by Paramatma in this world. So that is called Bharta. And when the body-mind complex is closely associated with our Atma, with our Paramatma inside, then it is called Jeev or Jivatma. And that Jivatma, because of its association with body-mind complex, experiences all the pain and pleasure which the body goes through, and therefore it is called Bhokta. And this was also explained in verse number 20 and 21. So these are the four different, positions of Paramatma which are possible in our daily experience. So this is what he's saying. And fifth position which he's saying, because it is the supreme, it takes care of everything. It is called Maheshwar, it is called Satchitanand Ghan, it is called pure consciousness, it is called supreme of the supreme. Like he has earlier said, Jyotiyon ka bhi Jyoti. So these are the different states of what we call universal consciousness, which can be experienced by each one of us in our daily routine, in our daily life. Now, I want to link this phrase with the process of meditation. When we do meditation, what we try to do? We try to segregate the body-mind complex from our consciousness. First, we look at each body part, so that is the body part is separate. Then we look at our breathing process in and out, so the breathing process is also separate. Then we also look at what is going on in our mind. We observe our mind and our intellect, the thought process which is going and coming in the mind of human beings. Now we are able to observe. So we segregate the consciousness from the thought process, that is our mind and our intellect. So the whole process of meditation finally leads you to actually do away with all the thoughts. The meaning is that once you do away with all the thoughts, that you have separated yourself from the body-mind complex completely. Your body is separate, your mind is separate, your intellect is separate. You have let them, put them aside, and you are concentrating on yourself. It becomes totally what we call subject. There's no object left in the process. So long as the object remains, then the kshetra comes into play. Once the object is not there, the kshetra does not come into play. The kshetragya remains completely separate from kshetra. And that becomes the state of upadrasta, that you are just observer, you are not bhokta, you are not experiencing anything. Whatever is happening in the body-mind complex, and you are not affected by that. As long as you remain bhokta, you are affected by that. But as you become upadrashta, that is the most pure state, then you become completely what you call in a state of samadhi, where the worldly activities do not impact on you. Then your tranquility, your peace, your activities, your dhriti, they remain strong and they are not impacted by any force outside. And that is what the meditation process is all about. So in meditation process, we move from bhokta and then slowly go to anumanta and then go to upadrashta. We become upadrashta, and that is what we should try to reach in our meditation process. So this is what this verse tells us, but this verse also tells us how Paramatma is involved in every process of our life. in every activity we perform, how he is involved. In some activities, he is involved as Bhokta, in some as Hanumanta, in some as Bharta, in some as Updrashta. So this is extremely important to understand. In the previous verse, where he said, why do we take birth in good or bad, species of life? Now that is also because the interaction of our jivatma with the physical nature, which causes vikar, which causes modifications in our body mind complex, is the root cause of all this, sansar chakra, all this cycle of birth and rebirth in which we remain involved in this world. So these four verses, they explain in great detail, though in a very precise way, the overall functioning of Purus and Prakriti, of the life force and the nature which we consider as inanimate. So the inanimate nature, as we say it, though it is not entirely true, and the animation, the life force, how they interact to make this world run its own course. Now, one thing which I would like to go back is that in verse number 19, Lord Krishna has said, Prakriti and Purus both are eternal, they are without any beginning. Now, though the Prakriti and Purus are without any beginning, the Sansaric Chakra is not without beginning. The Sansaric Chakra starts with the Yuga cycle. Yuga cycle is associated or linked with a day of Brahma. Brahma is that force which gives birth to this Sansaric Chakra. And that cycle moves as per the Yuga cycle. That is a day of Brahma, which is equal to 4.32 billion years. And then the night of Brahma starts when the equal time, 4.32 billion years, there is no life force anywhere, there is no Sansar Chakra visible in this universe. So the 4.32 billion years of life chakra comes into being with the Yuga cycle. Though the nature and the life force are eternal, they don't have the beginning, they don't have the end. The Sansaric Chakra has the beginning and the end, and that has been explained in detail in the cycle of Yugas. And the cycle of Yugas has been further divided into the four Yugas, that is Satyug, Treta Yug, Dwapar Yug, and Kali Yug. This is one cycle of four yugas is called one Mahayuga, and then there are 1,000 cycles of four yugas, which is equal to one day of Brahma. So this is the system which has been explained in variety of writings in India. You can find it in Bhagavad Puran, you can also find it in Tantras, you can also find it in other Puranas, how the cycle of the sansar works. So there's a difference between the cycle of sansar and the cycle of or we can say the birth of nature. Nature has no birth. Nature and life force both are eternal. They are without birth and without death. But the Sansaric Chakra has a birth and an ending. It begins and it ends. So this is what we must take into account. So I would end here today, and then we will continue in our next session from verse number 23 onwards. Thank you very much.